If you've never seen Into the Woods, here's the quick version. It's a 1987 Stephen Sondheim musical that takes a handful of classic fairy tales, Cinderella, Jack and the Beanstalk, Rapunzel, Little Red Riding Hood, and weaves them together through a single connecting story about a baker and his wife trying to break a curse on their family. The first act plays out like the fairy tales you remember. The second act shows what happens after Happily Ever After. It is, in the best possible way, not what you expect. Here's what makes Into the Woods one of the most quietly devastating musicals ever written. Everyone gets what they want by intermission. Cinderella gets her prince, Jack gets his riches from the beanstalk, the baker and his wife get the baby they've been longing for, every wish granted, every prayer answered. The lights go down on Act 1, and the feeling in the room is warm and satisfied, the way you feel at the end of a fairy tale that ends where fairy tales are supposed to end. And then Act 2 begins. The giant returns, the prince strays almost immediately, the baker's wife dies, and the audience slowly realizes that getting what you wished for wasn't the end of the story at all. It was just the beginning of a harder one. Sondheim said the show is about the consequences of wishes. That single sentence might be one of the most important things the Bible has to say too, just dressed up in a different costume. The characters in Into the Woods aren't wicked. They're not even particularly selfish. They want things you'd want too. Love, security, a family, a little adventure, a way out of a life that feels too small. The problem isn't that their desires are monstrous. The problem is that they're incomplete. They want the destination without thinking about the road. They want the prize without calculating the cost. The Bible is startlingly honest about this pattern. In James, we read, "Each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death." James isn't talking about twirling mustache villainy. He's talking about ordinary desire, unchecked and unexamined, that grows in directions we never intended. The wish itself isn't the problem. The problem is the wish that has no room in it for wisdom. No pause to ask, what will this cost? Who might it affect? Or whether it's actually what we need rather than simply what we want right now. Israel did the same thing. They wanted a king. Every other nation had one. And they were tired of feeling like the odd ones out. God warned them in detail exactly how badly it would go. The king would take their sons for the army, their daughters for the royal household, their fields for the treasury, and then, and this is the part that always gets me, God gave them one anyway. They got exactly what they asked for, and they suffered for it for generations. This is why unanswered prayer is sometimes the most merciful thing God does. Not always, but sometimes the silence is the grace. When the crisis hits in Act 2, watch what the characters do. They scatter. They blame each other. The baker runs away into the forest, overwhelmed and alone. Cinderella can't make a decision to save her life. The witch, who has been prickly and difficult throughout, finally just washes her hands of all of it. When things fall apart, the first instinct is to protect yourself, point fingers, and disappear. Maybe that sounds familiar. There's something deeply human about the impulse to go it alone when things get hard. Vulnerability feels like weakness. Admitting you're struggling feels like burdening someone else. And so we perform, and quietly fall apart in private, convinced that everyone else is handling their act too better than we are. They're not. They're just doing the same thing we are. The turning point of the musical comes in a quiet moment, not a big dramatic number. It's a song called "No One Is Alone." It's not triumphant. There's no great key change that sends you soaring. It's just true, simple and true. We cannot carry the consequences of our choices by ourselves. We were not designed to. We were made for community, for the kind of messy, honest, stick-around fellowship that looks at what you did and what happened to you and says, I see it. I'm not leaving. Paul's letter to the Galatians, chapter 6, says it directly. Bear one another's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Notice it doesn't say carry your own burdens really efficiently. It says each other's. The burden carrying is supposed to go both directions. You're supposed to be in a community where sometimes you're the one being held up, and sometimes you're the one doing the holding. Mature faith is not having all the answers when things fall apart. It's refusing to disappear when they do. Here's what I think is the most important thing to say, and maybe the hardest. Act 1 faith is the faith of answered prayers and happy endings. It's the faith of the testimony where everything worked out. The miracle came through, the diagnosis was benign, the job opened up. And I want to emphasize that that faith is real and it's worth celebrating. But Act 2 faith is something different. Act 2 faith is what remains when the giant comes, when the dream costs more than you expected, when you did everything right, you prayed, you believed, you showed up, and things still fell apart. Act 2 faith is what you have left when the story isn't over where you thought it was. Most people sitting in any room on any given Sunday are living in Act 2. They're not there yet, wherever there is. The temptation, and it's a powerful one, is to conclude that God wasn't listening, or that faith is something other people have, or that the whole thing just doesn't work the way they were told it did. But look at the Bible honestly, and you'll find that it is almost entirely an Act 2 book. Joseph doesn't get to skip the pit. David doesn't get to skip the wilderness. Paul doesn't get to skip the prison. And Jesus, the whole center of the story, goes through a Friday so dark that even he cries out, asking why he's been abandoned. Act 2 is not the absence of God. It is somehow mysteriously where God does the deepest work. The pit is where Joseph's character is formed. The wilderness is where David learns to pray. The prison is where Paul writes letters that are still changing lives 2,000 years later. And Friday, as it turns out, is not the end of the story either. None of those people got to know in the middle of it how the story would turn. They just had to keep going. That is what Act 2 asks of us too. Not certainty, just the next step. Don't abandon your faith because you're in Act 2. That may be exactly where it becomes real. Into the Woods ends quietly. There is no triumphant restoration. Nobody gets back exactly what they lost. What they get is something smaller and stranger, and in its own way more beautiful. A small patchwork family, reconstituted from brokenness, choosing to move forward together. not because everything is fixed, but because they are not alone. They are not going back, and they have to go somewhere. That is often what redemption actually looks like. Not the original dream perfectly restored, something new built from the pieces, a different kind of whole. So no matter where you are in the story right now, Act 1, things are good, the wishes are coming true, and it all feels like it's going the right direction, enjoy it. Be grateful and stay humble, because Act 2 comes for everyone eventually. Or are you in Act 2? Something's fallen apart. The cost was higher than you budgeted, and you're not sure the story ends anywhere you'd choose. Then the most important question isn't why did this happen? It's who are you walking through it with? And if you know someone who is deep into their Act 2 right now, reach out. A text, a call, showing up at their door, and just say, I'm not going anywhere. That's not a small thing. That is, in fact, the law of Christ fulfilled. And for that, I say thanks be to God. And may it be so.